Today was Karen Read trial day 14. I'm going to give you my daily recap. We start the full day of testimony off today with Matt McCabe back on the stand. He's being questioned by the Commonwealth. Mr. Lally is asking how he woke up the morning of January 29th. He says that he woke up to screaming. He heard the words Jen, 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 and it was really loud screaming over the phone. So Jen is on the phone with Karen. I believe it's right before 5 a.m. Karen calls her and she says that we can't find John. It was actually a call from John's niece, Kaylee, because at the time, Karen did not have Jen McCabe's phone number. Matt says that he overheard Karen saying that the last time she saw John, she was at the waterfall, and he says, I thought she was crazy because we saw her car pull up to 34 Fairview. He also says at some point he heard on the phone Karen say that she had a broken taillight on her car. So they all kind of start calling John. They start calling other people to figure out where John was, and eventually they get dressed, go downstairs, make coffee, and Karen comes over to the house. I also have to mention this is the first time that we're hearing all of these early morning details. He's the first witness to testify to any of this, and he says that Karen comes over to the house and she's screaming so loud and he wants her to get inside because she's going to wake up the neighbors. He didn't think it was safe for his wife to go out in Karen Read's car with the broken taillight and the snowstorm happening, but eventually she drives the car back to John's house and they are going to just go out and look for John. So he thinks that John is just on a friend's couch, but he ends up getting dressed and going over to 34 Fairview, and he sees an ambulance there and he sees Carrie Roberts' car too. He goes inside to the Albert house and Officer Link is there, and that's when he gets questioned by the police officer. It's like a group interview basically that they end up doing with Brian Albert, Nicole Albert, Jen McCabe, and himself. Julie Albert enters the picture there too. He was at the house for about 4 hours in the morning. He spoke with the state police, Michael Proctor and Yuri Buchanan, in the morning later on when they came over to his house. And he says that they interviewed him and his wife separately. He just says, no, my wife was up in the bedroom somewhere, but we know that you probably got interviewed together. There's no record of that though. We get into the cross-examination by the defense. It's done by Mr. Yannetti, and he brings up the weekend of January 2nd and asks, did you hang out with Karen and John that weekend? And he says, yes, I did. I bumped into them at the hillside, I think it was, and Brian Albert was also there. We get into the night of the 28th at the waterfall. He brings up some questions about Brian Higgins and Brian Albert that are there and sees if he sees them fighting or practice fighting. And he says, oh, I think they were playing grab ass. And Yannetti goes, are you saying that they were grabbing each other's asses? And there's a little moment where he kind of gets flustered there. They leave the waterfall bar, and he says that when he arrived at 34 Fairview, there was also a Jeep with a plow parked at the end of the driveway in front of the mailbox. He found out later that that Jeep belonged to Brian Higgins. So we get into a little bit of his testimony from April 22nd when he was interviewed with Michael Proctor, and he says a few conflicting statements about where the dark SUV was. Apparently he was really looking out the window quite a bit, and he remembers that his wife was communicating with John on the drive over from Waterfall and texting a little bit while they were at the house. So he gives a few conflicting statements. Basically, there's just it's move on from this, but this could be a key point for the jury too. He doesn't see any damage to that SUV, doesn't see anyone in the lawn. They leave and they're taking Julie Nagel and Sarah Levinson home. And he is asked if he forgot something in the house because other people have testified that he did. But he's saying he didn't forget anything in the house and he didn't see anything in the lawn. He didn't hear anybody in the back seat say that they saw a black blob in the lawn either. This is when it got really spicy in the courtroom. Nicole and Brian Albert have already testified, and we have Matt McCabe here on the stand, and I think the defense really thought that he was going to be a good weak link to introduce this, but we are introduced to a group text that the four of them have. I think that Matt had no idea that this existed. Basically, the first text said, troopers back out front, but in front of Asian house. you can see him say, "What the hell," while he's reading the text. He kind of pretends like he can't see the writing because the way the writing was, it was a little weird. I'll pull it up for you. So he testifies that he was just driving by 34 Fairview, and Yannetti asked if he was kind of like scoping it out and doing surveillance to see what was going on. He said, "No, I was just doing something, picking up a car." But this is what he texted the foursome. I did read somewhere that there are a few people on the jury that are of Asian descent as well. The next door neighbors were this family, and they were the Chungs. Apparently they were not friendly with the Alberts though. Then Matt McCabe texts the group that he is going to try to get a photo, and Brian Albert says okay. It was kind of weird too because he said he needed a flashlight to read the text, so he borrows a phone, and then there's like a recess for a little bit, and he has his own phone, and he's shining his phone in the middle of the daylight in this courtroom to read these text messages. The other thing that I think is really interesting is he is a IT recruiter, and I think he would have known how to delete and manipulate text messages, so I'm wondering if some of these were deleted or how these were found. So they didn't ask Brian Albert about these. They saved them for Matt McCabe. They take their mid-morning break, and then after that they start with a sidebar, and we're going to try to get those text messages admitted. They're going through the text, and Bev says she wants to move this testimony along right in front of the jury, so I think this is pivotal. If I was on the jury, I would want to know all of this, but she seemed like she was trying to rush things. I found this exchange of some more text messages on Twitter. It was in reference to Carrie Roberts, basically saying that it's weird that she's been barely interviewed. Brian Albert responds, "Hope they don't think she's making it up after the fact for some reason, but if they barely interviewed her, that's on them." So I personally think that Carrie Roberts is not in on any of this framing that the defense is alleging. Her husband seemed really nice and genuine on the stand, and it will be interesting to see if we hear from her soon. So at this point, we have an extremely frustrated judge. She basically throws the pages with the text messages. She's very upset that they're unable to be read, apologizes to the jury. It was very dramatic. The last text message that we see is from Matt McCabe, and this is all going down on February 1st for the record, so just a couple days after. I forgot to mention that earlier, but the last text that we see is, "Tell them the guy never went in the house." He testifies in front of everyone that the guy is in reference to John O'Keefe. And in this group text, Brian Albert's response is exactly. And then he stands by the point that John O'Keefe never went in the house. He said, "It's a fact." It feels like a very big moment. The defense says, "We're done here." And then there's a little bit of redirect. And Lally asks him, "What was this in reference to?" And he says, "No, Channel 4 was at D&E Pizza." So the them in the text, "Tell them the guy never went in the house," was D&E Pizza, Channel 4 interviewers. I'm going to make a part 2 for Jen McCabe's testimony, so stay tuned for that.